The Miami boardwalk buzzed with life under the blazing August sun. The air was thick with the scent of salt water, sizzling street food, and the faint tang of sunscreen. Vendors hawked colorful trinkets, their voices blending with the laughter of families and the rhythmic crash of waves. Amid the vibrant chaos, Jake Martinez, a 25-year-old gardener with calloused hands and a quiet demeanor, tended to the palm-lined flower beds near the fairground square. His life was a steady rhythm of clipping branches, watering lawns, and collecting a modest paycheck. Nothing extraordinary, just the kind of routine that kept him grounded. Jake's faded green work shirt clung to his skin as he knelt to prune a stubborn shrub. His dark hair fell into his eyes, and he wiped sweat from his brow, glancing at the lively crowd. Tourists snapped selfies, kids chased seagulls, and couples strolled hand in hand. It was another perfect day in paradise, or so it seemed. Then, a piercing scream shattered the festive hum, a child's cry, raw and desperate, cutting through the noise like a knife. Jake's head snapped up. In the center of the square, near a vendor's cart, a small figure lay crumpled on the ground, surrounded by shattered plates. The crowd froze, their chatter fading into a stunned murmur. A little girl, no older than 8, was sprawled amid the debris, her body still. Jake's heart lurched. Without a second thought, he dropped his pruning shears and pushed through the throng, his work boots thudding against the cobblestones. "Move. Give her space," he called, his voice steady but urgent. The onlookers parted, their faces a mix of shock and curiosity. Jake knelt beside the girl, his knees pressing into the warm stone. She was frail, her pale skin almost translucent under the harsh sunlight. Her blonde hair was tangled, and her clothes, a faded pink t-shirt and worn sneakers, looked too big for her tiny frame. Her chest barely rose with shallow breaths. "Hey kid, can you hear me?" Jake's voice softened, but his pulse raced. He gently checked her wrist for a pulse, his fingers trembling. It was faint but there. A woman's voice broke through the crowd, shrill with panic. "Emily. That's my Emily." Jake glanced up but couldn't spot the speaker. The girl, Emily, stirred, her eyelids fluttering. Before he could process more, her body jerked violently. Her limbs twitched, and her head tilted back in a convulsion. Jake's stomach dropped. He'd seen enough in his rough neighborhood to recognize a seizure. "Someone call 911, he shouted, cradling Emily's head to keep it from hitting the ground. A few people fumbled for their phones, while others backed away, whispering nervously. One man, filming the scene, lowered his camera, shame flickering across his face. Jake's focus stayed on Emily. "Hang in there, Emily. Help's coming," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her clammy forehead. Her convulsions slowed, but her breathing was ragged. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of concern and unease. Jake felt their eyes on him, but he didn't care. All that mattered was the girl in front of him, fighting for every breath. Then, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "What the hell is going on here?" A man in a crisp navy suit strode forward, his polished shoes clicking with authority. Richard Crowe, the 40-year-old manager of Ocean Star Resort, loomed over the scene. His slicked-back hair and steely gray eyes gave him the air of someone who thrived on control. The crowd parted for him, their whispers fading into silence. Jake didn't look up. "She's having a seizure. Ambulance is on the way." His tone was clipped, his hand steady as he supported Emily. Crowe's lip curled, his gaze sweeping over the broken plates, the trembling girl, and the gawking tourists. "This is unacceptable," he snapped. "This spectacle is scaring our guests. Get her out of here. Now." Jake's head whipped around, his brown eyes blazing. "Are you serious? She can't be moved until the paramedics arrive. She could get hurt worse." His voice, usually calm, carried a hard edge. The crowd shifted, a few people nodding in agreement, others muttering disapproval at Crowe's callousness. Crowe's jaw tightened. "I'm in charge here, Martinez. This is bad for business. Do as I say." Jake stood, placing himself between Emily and Crowe. At 6 feet, he wasn't imposing, but his stance was unyielding. "I'm not risking her life for your damn resort's image," he said, his voice low but firm. The words hung in the air, heavy with defiance. A woman in the crowd gasped, and someone clapped softly, emboldened by Jake's stand. Crowe's face reddened, but before he could retort, the wail of sirens pierced the air. Red and blue lights flashed as an ambulance screeched to a stop. Paramedics rushed forward, their equipment clattering. Jake stepped back, his hands shaking as the adrenaline ebbed. He watched as they stabilized Emily, slipping an oxygen mask over her pale face. Her small hand twitched, and Jake felt a pang in his chest. He didn't know her, but he couldn't shake the need to protect her. As the medics loaded Emily onto a stretcher, Crowe leaned in close to Jake, his voice a venomous hiss. "You just made a big mistake, kid. This isn't over." He turned on his heel, barking at a nearby employee to clean up the mess, then disappeared into the crowd. Jake stood rooted to the spot, his heart pounding. The crowd began to disperse, some casting sympathetic glances his way, others filming him discreetly. He wiped his hands on his jeans, the weight of Crowe's threat sinking in. He just crossed a man who could ruin him, a man who held Jake's job, his livelihood, in his manicured hands. Yet, as he watched the ambulance pull away, its lights fading into the Miami heat, Jake's thoughts weren't on himself. They were on Emily, her frightened eyes, her fragile frame, and the question burning in his mind: who left her alone in a place like this? He didn't know it yet, but that moment, that single, impulsive act of compassion had set him on a path that would test his courage, unravel dark secrets, and change his life forever. The Miami night was heavy with humidity, the ocean's rhythmic pulse a faint backdrop to Jake Martinez's racing thoughts. He sat on a weathered bench by the boardwalk, the neon glow of distant fairground lights casting long shadows across the sand. The events of the day replayed in his mind like a looping reel: Emily's seizure, the shattered plates, Richard Crowe's icy threat. Jake's hands, still stained with garden dirt, clenched into fists. He'd done the right thing, hadn't he? So why did his chest feel so tight, like the world was closing in? His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his spiral. A text from Mike, his co-worker and closest friend. "Heard about the square. Crowe's pissed. Watch your back, man." Jake sighed, tossing the phone onto the bench. Mike was right. Crowe wasn't the type to let defiance slide. As manager of Ocean Star Resort, he wielded power like a weapon, and Jake, a low-paid gardener, was an easy target. But it wasn't Crowe's threat that kept him awake. It was Emily. Her pale face, her trembling hands, the way she looked so utterly alone. Who was she? And why had no one claimed her? Jake stood, brushing sand from his jeans, and made a decision. He couldn't just walk away. Not yet. He grabbed his beat-up pickup truck and drove to Miami General Hospital, the city's neon skyline blurring past. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed as he stepped into the sterile lobby, the antiseptic smell sharp in his nose. A nurse at the desk, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a name tag reading Ellen, looked up. "You here for someone?" she asked, her tone gentle but tired. "Yeah, the girl from the boardwalk. Emily." "I helped her today," Jake said, rubbing the back of his neck. He felt out of place, his work boots scuffing the polished floor. Ellen's face softened. "You're the guy from the square. Come with me." She led him through a maze of corridors to the pediatric wing. The walls were painted with cheerful murals, but the faint beeping of monitors and the hush of voices made the air heavy. Ellen paused outside her room. "She's stable, but she's been through a lot. Malnutrition, dehydration, and no families come forward." Jake's stomach twisted. "No one." Ellen shook her head. "Not yet. Go easy on her, okay?" She's scared. He nodded and stepped inside. Emily sat on the hospital bed, her small frame dwarfed by the white sheets. She clutched a tattered stuffed unicorn, its once bright fur faded to gray. Her blonde hair was neater now, tied back with a hospital band, but her eyes, big, hazel, and haunted, locked onto Jake with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "Hey, Emily," Jake said softly, pulling a chair beside her bed. "I'm Jake. Remember me?" She nodded, her fingers tightening around the unicorn. "You helped me when I fell?" "Yeah. How you feeling now?" Her lips quivered. "Better. But it's loud here. And I don't like the needles." Her voice was barely above a whisper, and Jake's heart ached at the fear in it. "You're safe now," he said, leaning forward. "The doctors are taking care of you." Emily's gaze dropped to the unicorn. "That's what people say. But then they leave." The words hit Jake like a punch. She sounded so resigned, like abandonment was all she'd ever known. He wanted to ask more, but her eyelids were drooping, exhaustion winning out. "Get some rest, okay?" he said. "I'll check on you tomorrow." Her eyes flicked up, searching his face. "Promise." The word caught him off guard. A promise was no small thing, not to a kid who'd clearly been let down before. But looking into her eyes, he couldn't say no. "Promise," he said, his voice firm. Back in his truck, Jake gripped the steering wheel, the weight of that promise settling over him. He didn't know Emily, didn't know her story, but he couldn't shake the feeling that walking away would haunt him forever. His own childhood hadn't been easy. Raised by a single mom who worked double shifts, he'd learned early that the world could be harsh. But he'd had her love, her quiet strength. Emily, it seemed, had no one. The next morning, Jake returned to work, his stomach knotted with dread. The resort's manicured grounds sparkled under the sun, but the air felt charged, like a storm was brewing. Mike was waiting by the tool shed, his usual grin replaced by a grimace. "Crowe's been asking about you," Mike said, handing Jake a rake. "He's telling everyone you caused a scene to play hero. Says it's bad for the resort's image." Jake's jaw tightened. "I didn't do it for attention. That kid needed help." "I know, man, but Crowe doesn't care. He's got investors breathing down his neck. You're an easy scapegoat." Mike hesitated, then added, "There's a video going around too. Some tourist posted it online. You yelling at Crowe. People are eating it up." Jake froze. "A video?" "Yeah. Hashtag boardwalk hero or something. You're trending, dude." Mike tried to laugh, but it came out strained. Jake's mind raced. A video could make things worse. Crowe would hate the spotlight, especially if it painted him as the villain. Sure enough, by midday, Jake was summoned to Crowe's office. The manager's suite was a study in cold luxury. Glass desk, leather chairs, a single framed photo of a yacht gleaming under a tropical sky. Crowe stood by the window, his back to Jake, his silhouette sharp against the ocean view. "You've caused quite a stir, Martinez," Crowe said, turning slowly. His voice was calm, but his eyes glinted with barely restrained fury. "That little stunt yesterday? It's costing us. Guests are complaining, investors are asking questions. All because you couldn't follow orders." Jake's fists clenched at his sides. "I wasn't going to let a kid die for your reputation." Crowe's smile was thin, predatory. "Noble. But nobility doesn't pay the bills. You're on thin ice. One more misstep, and you're out." Jake left the office, his pulse pounding in his ears. He should have felt scared. Crowe could fire him in a heartbeat, leaving him with nothing. But instead, anger simmered in his veins. Crowe cared more about his resort's image than a child's life. And Emily? She was still alone, still vulnerable. That evening, Jake returned to the hospital. Emily was awake, coloring a picture of a sunflower with crayons a nurse had given her. She looked up, her face brightening. "You came back. Told you I would," Jake said, sitting beside her. "Nice drawing." She shrugged, but a shy smile tugged at her lips. "It's for my mom. She liked flowers." Jake's chest tightened. "Where's your mom now, Emily?" Her smile faded, and she hugged the unicorn closer. "She went away. A long time ago. I've been by myself since then. I collect bottles sometimes, to buy food." The words were so matter-of-fact, yet they cut Jake to the core. An 8-year-old, fending for herself on the streets of Miami. How had no one noticed? How had the world failed her so completely? "Emily," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "You're not alone anymore. I'm here." Her eyes met his, wide and searching, as if testing the truth of his words. Then, in a small voice, she asked, "For real?" "For real," Jake said, and in that moment, he knew he meant it. The Miami sun beat down on the Ocean Star Resort, its pristine lawns and sparkling pools a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside Jake Martinez. The morning after his tense meeting with Richard Crowe, Jake worked in the gardens, his hands moving mechanically as he trimmed hedges. His mind, though, was elsewhere, on Emily, alone in her hospital bed, and on the video Mike had mentioned, now spreading like wildfire online. The weight of his promise to her pressed against his chest, mingling with the dread of Crowe's threat. He was a gardener, not a hero. So why did it feel like he was standing on the edge of a cliff? Mike found him near the rose beds, his face grim. "You seen it yet?" he asked, holding out his phone. Jake wiped sweat from his brow and took it. The screen showed shaky footage from the boardwalk. Emily convulsing, Jake kneeling beside her, his voice cutting through the chaos as he faced down Crowe. The caption read, "Hero Gardener stands up to heartless resort boss." Hashtags like hashtag boardwalk hero and hashtag save Emily were racking up thousands of likes. Jake's stomach churned. The attention was a double-edged sword, support for Emily, but a spotlight on his defiance. "Over 1 million views," Mike said, shaking his head. "Crowe's gonna lose it." Jake handed the phone back, his jaw tight. He already has. Threatened to fire me yesterday. Mike whistled low. You're playing with fire, man. Crowe's not just a jerk, he's connected. Investors, politicians, you name it. You need to lay low. But laying low wasn't an option. Not when Emily's face, pale, frightened, clutching her unicorn, haunted him. Jake finished his shift in silence, the hum of the resort's luxury feeling hollow. Tourists lounged by the pool, oblivious to the drama unfolding behind the scenes. As he packed up his tools, his phone buzzed. It was Ellen, the nurse from the hospital. Jake, you need to come by, she said, her voice urgent. Something's up with Emily. He didn't ask questions. 20 minutes later, he was back at Miami General, his work boots echoing in the pediatric wing. Ellen met him outside Emily's room, her expression troubled. She's okay, physically, she said, lowering her voice. But we got a visit today. A couple claiming to be her aunt and uncle. They want custody. Jake's blood ran cold. Custody? She said she's been alone for a year. Where were they when she was starving on the streets? Ellen glanced around, then leaned closer. That's not all. I overheard them talking to someone on the phone. Sounded like Crowe. They didn't seem right. Too pushy, too polished. I don't trust them. The pieces clicked together in Jake's mind. Crowe wasn't just out to fire him. He was orchestrating something bigger, something to erase the problem Emily represented. But why? What did a little girl have to do with his precious resort? Jake's fists clenched. Can I see her? Ellen nodded, and he entered the room. Emily sat cross-legged on the bed, coloring a new sunflower picture, but her movements were tense, her unicorn clutched tightly. She looked up, her hazel eyes wide with relief. Jake, you came. Course I did, he said, forcing a smile as he sat beside her. Heard you had some visitors. Her face fell, and she hugged the unicorn closer. They said they're my family, but I don't know them. Mom told me to stay away from Dad's side. She said they're bad people. Her voice trembled, and Jake's heart twisted. Bad how? He asked gently. Emily's gaze dropped to the bed. She didn't say much. Just that Dad did something awful, and his family helped him. I was little, but I remember her crying. She looked up, her eyes pleading. I don't want to go with them, Jake. Please. The fear in her voice was a knife to his gut. He took her small hand, his calloused fingers dwarfing hers. I'm not letting anyone take you anywhere you don't want to go. Okay. She nodded, but the doubt in her eyes lingered. Jake knew promises weren't enough. He needed a plan. That evening, he tracked down a contact Mike had mentioned, Linda Wilson, a 50-year-old lawyer who ran Sunshine Kids, a local nonprofit helping vulnerable children. Her office was a cozy space in downtown Miami, filled with children's artwork and stacks of legal files. Linda, with her warm smile and sharp eyes, listened as Jake recounted everything. The boardwalk, Crowe's threats, the suspicious relatives. This smells like trouble, Linda said, tapping a pen against her desk. Crowe's got influence, and if he's involved with these people, they're likely proxies. But we can fight this legally. First, we need to dig into their background and file for emergency guardianship to keep Emily safe. Jake hesitated. Guardianship? I'm nobody. I can barely pay my rent. Linda's gaze softened. You're the only one she trusts, Jake. That's not nothing. You don't have to decide now, but we need to move fast. He left her office with a stack of papers and a head full of doubts. Guardianship meant responsibility, legal, financial, emotional. He was 25, scraping by, with no family to fall back on. But the alternative, leaving Emily to strangers tied to Crowe, was unthinkable. Back at the hospital, he found Emily asleep, her sunflower drawing tucked under her pillow. He sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall, and felt a resolve harden within him. He'd fight, not just for her, but against the injustice of a system that let kids like her slip through the cracks. The next day, the storm broke. Crowe called Jake into his office again, his demeanor colder than ever. You're done, Martinez, he said, sliding a termination letter across his glass desk. Your little hero act has cost us bookings. Investors are furious. Clear out your locker by noon. Jake stood, his anger barely contained. This isn't about bookings. You're scared of that video, of what people are saying. And now you're trying to bury Emily's story. Crowe's eyes narrowed. Careful, kid. You're out of your league. Keep pushing, and you'll lose more than your job. Jake walked out, his heart pounding but his head clear. He was jobless, exposed, and up against a man with endless resources. Yet, as he drove to Sunshine Kids to meet Linda, a fire burned in him. Crowe thought he could silence him, but Jake was just getting started. Linda had news. Her team had uncovered records linking the aunt and uncle to a string of fraud cases. They weren't family. They were opportunists, likely paid by Crowe to take Emily and keep her quiet. "What's Crowe hiding?" Jake asked, his voice low. Linda's expression was grim. "Something big. Emily's mother left a letter in her belongings. It mentions her father's business, and Crowe's name came up. We're digging deeper, but this could be dangerous." The Miami air was thick with the promise of rain, gray clouds rolling over the city as Jake Martinez stood outside the Sunshine Kid's office, clutching a manila folder. Inside were documents that could change everything. Records linking Emily's supposed aunt and uncle, the Greens, to a history of fraud, and a cryptic letter from Emily's mother hinting at Richard Crowe's involvement in something shady. Jake's pulse raced. Losing his job at Ocean Star Resort had been a blow, but this was a war. Crowe wasn't just trying to erase Emily. He was hiding a secret, and Jake was determined to expose it. Inside, Linda Wilson pored over the files, her brow furrowed. The nonprofit's office buzzed with quiet urgency, volunteers sorting papers and answering phones. The viral video of Jake confronting Crowe on the boardwalk had sparked a flood of donations to Sunshine Kids, with hashtag #SaveEmily and hashtag #JusticeForJake trending across social media. Strangers were rallying behind Jake, but the attention only tightened the knot in his stomach. Fame was a flimsy shield against a man like Crowe. "These Greens are bad news," Linda said, sliding a printout across her desk. "Arrests for identity theft, scams, you name it. No way they're Emily's family. And this call log," she tapped another sheet, "shows they've been in contact with Crowe's office for weeks." Jake's jaw clenched. He's paying them to take her. But why? What's Emily got to do with his resort? Linda leaned back, her sharp eyes studying him. "That letter from her mother, Sarah, mentions a deal her ex-husband, Emily's father, made with Crowe years ago. Something illegal, maybe fraud, maybe worse. Sarah wrote she was scared for Emily, that Crowe might come after her if she talked. We need more, but this is enough to challenge the Greens' custody claim." Jake's mind raced. Emily, an 8-year-old girl, was a loose end in Crowe's perfect world. But what could she know? He thought of her haunted eyes, the way she clung to her unicorn like it was her only anchor. Whatever Crowe was hiding, it was worth silencing a child over. The thought made Jake's blood boil. He visited Emily that afternoon at Miami General. She was sitting up in bed, sketching a garden full of sunflowers, her small hands steady despite the 4 in her arm. Her face lit up when she saw him. "Jake, look, I drew this for you." She held up the picture, her smile fragile but genuine. "It's beautiful," Jake said, sitting beside her. "You're going to have to teach me how to draw like that." Her smile faded, and she hugged her unicorn. "The nurse said those people came again. The ones who say they're my family. I told her I don't know them, but she said I might have to go with them." Her voice cracked, and Jake's heart sank. "Hey," he said, taking her hand. "I'm working with some good people to make sure that doesn't happen. You trust me, right?" She nodded, but her eyes were glassy with tears. "Mom said to never trust Dad's family. She said they hurt people. I don't want to go, Jake. I'm scared." The fear in her voice was a fire in Jake's chest. He squeezed her hand. "You're not going anywhere. I promised you, remember? We're in this together." Back at Sunshine Kids, Linda had a plan. "We're filing for emergency guardianship to keep Emily with you while we investigate," she said. "But Crowe's not sitting idle. He's hired a PR firm to spin the narrative. They're painting you as a fame-hungry troublemaker using Emily for clout." Jake's fists tightened. "Let them try. I don't care what they say about me. I just want her safe." Linda's smile was grim but approving. "Good. Because this is about to get messy. We've got a court date in 3 days to challenge the Greens' claim. Be ready." The hearing was held in a sterile Miami courthouse, the air thick with tension. Jake sat in a borrowed suit, feeling like an imposter among the polished lawyers. Emily, in a simple blue dress, sat beside Linda, her unicorn tucked under her arm. The Greens, a middle-aged couple with hard eyes and fake smiles, sat across the room, their lawyer whispering in their ear. Crowe wasn't there, but his presence loomed. Jake could feel it in the Greens' smug confidence. Linda presented their case, the Greens' criminal history, their lack of any verifiable connection to Emily, and the suspicious timing of their claim. The judge, a stern woman with gray streaks in her hair, listened intently. Then Emily was called to speak. Jake's heart pounded as she walked to the stand, her small frame dwarfed by the courtroom. "Emily," the judge asked gently, "do you know these people?" Emily's voice was soft but clear. "No, ma'am. My mom said to stay away from my dad's family. They did bad things. I want to stay with Jake. He keeps his promises." The room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Jake's throat tightened, pride and fear warring within him. The judge nodded, her expression unreadable, and dismissed Emily. Linda leaned over. "She did great. But the Greens' lawyer is pushing hard. They've got forged documents claiming kinship." The hearing ended inconclusively, with the judge ordering a deeper investigation into the Greens' background. Jake felt a flicker of hope, but it was short-lived. That evening, a local news site ran a hit piece. "Gardner exploits child for fame," sources say. The article, laced with quotes from anonymous resort insiders, accused Jake of staging the boardwalk incident for attention. Social media exploded, some defending Jake, others tearing him apart. Hashtag Boardwalk Hero was now joined by hashtag Jake the Fake. Jake sat in his cramped apartment, staring at the hateful comments on his phone. His savings were dwindling, his job was gone, and now his name was being dragged through the mud. Doubt crept in. Maybe he was in over his head. But then he thought of Emily's drawing, her small hand in his, and the fire returned. Crowe could attack him, but he wouldn't break him. Linda called with a breakthrough. "We found a witness," she said, her voice taut with excitement. "A former accountant at Ocean Star. She says Crowe and Emily's father were involved in a money laundering scheme years ago. Sarah, Emily's mom, knew too much and threatened to go to the police. That's why she ran with Emily. The accountant's willing to testify, but she's scared. We need to protect her." Jake's mind reeled. This was bigger than he'd imagined, a criminal conspiracy, with Emily caught in the crosshairs. "What do we do?" he asked. "We keep pushing," Linda said. "File a formal complaint against Crowe at the state. If we can tie him to the Greens in the scheme, we can end this. But Jake, this will put a target on your back. Are you ready?" He thought of Emily's tearful plea, her trust in him. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside. The Miami dawn broke with a golden glow, but Jake Martinez felt no warmth as he stood outside the Sunshine Kid's office, his breath uneven. The past week had been a whirlwind, the viral video, the courtroom battle, and the chilling revelation that Richard Crowe was tangled in a money laundering scheme tied to Emily's father. Now, with a witness ready to testify and a formal complaint filed against Crowe, Jake was on the brink of exposing a powerful man. But the cost was steep, his reputation was battered, his savings were gone, and the Greens, Emily's fraudulent relatives, were still pushing for custody. Jake's promise to Emily burned in his chest, a beacon through the storm. Inside, Linda Wilson was a whirlwind of focus, her desk buried under legal documents. The nonprofit buzzed with energy, fueled by donations pouring in from hashtag Save Emily supporters. The public's outrage over Crowe's callousness had turned Ocean Star Resort into a pariah, bookings plummeted, and social media buzzed with boycott calls. Yet Crowe wasn't backing down. His latest move was a slick press conference, where he painted himself as a victim of baseless attacks, and Jake as a manipulative opportunist. The lies stung, but Jake had no time for self-pity. Emily's future hung in the balance. Linda looked up, her eyes sharp. Our witness, the accountant, gave a sworn statement. She's got records, bank transfers, fake invoices linking Crowe to Emily's father. Sarah, Emily's mom, found out and threatened to blow the whistle. That's why she fled with Emily. Crowe's been trying to clean up loose ends ever since. Jake's fists clenched. So Emily's a threat because she might remember something her mom said? Exactly, Linda said. We've got enough to go to the state attorney. But Crowe's lawyers are circling. They're trying to discredit the accountant and bury us in paperwork. We need to stay focused. Jake nodded, but his thoughts were with Emily. He drove to Miami General, the city's humid air pressing against him. In her hospital room, Emily sat cross-legged, reading a worn copy of Charlotte's Web, her unicorn tucked beside her. Her face brightened when she saw him. Jake. The nurse said I might get to leave soon. Can I stay with you? Her hope was a knife to his heart. He sat beside her, forcing a smile. That's what we're fighting for, kid. But some people are making it tough. I need you to be brave a little longer, okay? She nodded, her small hand gripping his. I'm not scared when you're here. You're like my family. The words hit Jake hard, stirring memories of his own childhood, his mom's quiet strength, the nights he felt safe despite their struggles. He squeezed Emily's hand. You're my family too, Emily. We'll get through this. The final court hearing loomed, a make-or-break moment. Linda's team worked tirelessly, bolstered by pro bono lawyers drawn to the hashtag #SaveEmilyCosts. The accountant's testimony was damning. She detailed how Crowe funneled dirty money through Ocean Star's accounts, using Emily's father as a front. Sarah's letter, found in Emily's belongings, corroborated the story, naming Crowe as a threat. The Greens, exposed as frauds with no ties to Emily, crumbled under cross-examination. Their lawyer, caught off guard, withdrew their custody claim mid-hearing. The judge's ruling was swift. Emergency guardianship granted to Jake, pending further review. The courtroom erupted in applause, and Emily, sitting beside Linda, threw her arms around Jake. "You did it," she whispered, her eyes shining. Jake hugged her back, his throat tight. It wasn't over, but it was a victory. Crowe's empire unraveled faster than Jake expected. The state attorney launched an investigation, and the accountant's records led to a cascade of charges: fraud, money laundering, and witness intimidation. Ocean Star Resort, already bleeding clients, was hit with a federal audit. By week's end, it was bankrupt, its once glistening pools empty, its gardens overgrown. Crowe stood in his deserted office, staring at a headline: "Resort Tycoon Faces Ruin and Scandal." His cold facade cracked, revealing a man undone by his own ruthlessness. He'd gambled on power and lost. Jake, meanwhile, was rebuilding. Sunshine Kid secured a small rental house near the beach, funded by donations. Jake and Emily moved in, turning the bare space into a home with thrift store furniture and Emily's sunflower drawings. Linda offered Jake a role at the nonprofit, leading a new project, Sunlit Shores, a community garden for kids from tough backgrounds. "You're a symbol of hope," she told him. "People see you and believe in second chances." Jake wasn't sure about the symbol part. He was still just a guy who'd acted on instinct. But when he saw Emily laugh, planting marigolds in the garden's first beds, he felt a purpose he'd never known. The opening of Sunlit Shores was a celebration, with families crowding the paths, kids chasing butterflies, and reporters snapping photos. Jake spoke briefly, his voice steady. "This isn't just a garden. It's a place for kids to grow, to feel safe, to know they're enough." Emily tugged his sleeve after, her eyes bright. "We made this, didn't we?" "We sure did," Jake said, ruffling her hair. "You and me, kid." Crowe's fall was complete. A guilty plea spared him a long trial, but his name was toxic. He left Miami, a shadow of the man who'd once ruled the boardwalk. Jake and Emily, though, were just beginning. The garden flourished, a haven where Emily thrived, her laughter a daily reminder of why Jake had fought. One evening, as they watered seedlings under a pink sunset, Emily looked up. "Think Mom would like this place?" Jake smiled, his heart full. "I think she'd be proud of you. And us."